release and all those fun things. Hey, good afternoon. How are we all doing? Good. So this panel is entitled Business Intelligence and Data Warehousing, in case you can't read. And in particular, this is an interesting topic in the world of big data for two reasons. One, the big data companies don't like talking about it because it's boring. That's what we've done for the last 2 decades. But most companies, especially companies outside the 5-mile radius, this area here, probably want to start a discussion on this topic. So we're going to talk about this today. I'm going to introduce the panelists in a second, and we've got some questions for them. I would ask you to start thinking about your questions ahead of time. But one thing I'm going to say before I start off here, if you haven't gone through the museum exhibits, you should do such. Right? And here's the reason why. It's kind of a humbling experience. You realize that in spite of all of our masters of the universe mentality that kind of permeates the valley here, we stand on the shoulders of people who stand on the shoulders of people who stand on the shoulders of others. We wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for a series of activities that are well documented down below, of people who've done things before us. Don't forget the past. The past will teach us a lot about the future. In fact, a lot of this conversation today is going to be about the things that we've done in the past in the BI data warehouse world and what that means to you and your organization with respect to big data. So I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves, and I'm going to ask each one of them to take a position or two with respect to what is their perspective as far as data warehouse and or BI in a big data world. And Prashant, I'm going to start with you.
Thanks, Bill, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Prashant Natarajan, and I'm a senior manager of development and also play product strategy roles at Oracle's Data Sciences Global Business Unit. So, just briefly, at Oracle, we build products for the healthcare provider, hospitals, life sciences, and genomics industries, and essentially create products using Oracle technology that folks can use for the transaction analytics needs. My own background has been almost exclusively in the healthcare and life sciences markets for the last 17 years, and been building, both designing and building systems that deal with that transaction analytics. I write a few books, and I am the author of a couple of books on business communication and business intelligence. And my most recent book is part of the big data package from the Health Information Management System Society called Implementing BI in Your Healthcare Organization. I would strongly encourage you to go buy it, even though I don't get much by the way of royalties. So, with respect to taking a position,
Yes, sir.
this is a topic that's pretty close to heart, and my position is pretty straightforward. I would like to quote a great American whose wisdom still remains today. Short story first. Mark Twain was this interesting character whose death was written about more so than any other person in the US. So the last time that somebody wrote about his death after his cousin died, he essentially wrote a rejoinder in the New York Times the next day. You'd have probably tweeted that today. Along the lines of reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. That, I think, is the metaphor for where data warehousing and BI are in with big data today. It's a lot more catchier headlines to write about how the oldies, and I include myself in that group, are on their way out, and the new tsunami of big data is going to wipe all of us out and bring this new breed called data scientists who are going to boldly venture where nobody else has ventured before. My position is that data warehousing and big data analytics are absolutely separate from each other, though they are absolutely complementary with each other. I also believe that big data analytics will result in greater, stronger use of data warehouses as they exist today and moving forward. So far from the death of data warehousing and BI, I do acknowledge a difference between both, but I think there will be two very strongly complementary things that we'll have to consider moving forward.
Excellent, thank you. Andrew?
Okay, let me see if I can be as passionate and an article in Discussion Post, which are I have not written any book so far. I've written only a poem for my 4-year-old and it didn't work out well. But again, my name is Ankur Gupta. I run big data practice for Sears Holdings Corporation. So Sears is a traditional retailer that hopefully most of you know about, hopefully most of you shop at. What you may not know is this is also the largest services company in the US. We are in at least 3 homes for repair, delivery, installation, ton of home-related work. So we get data from a lot of spaces, a lot of places essentially. And Sears started its big data journey over 6 years ago, and today we have a very large big data center of excellence with 250 plus resources. We also have multi-petabytes in data and over 1200 nodes and Hadoop clusters and whatnot. So I go ahead at Sears. I'm responsible for big data practice and looking at what are the new technologies and new innovation that's happening that we could use within our enterprise. And also, I run a small startup that's owned by Sears, where we actually productize these offerings and take them to outside other enterprises where they want to see a real life experience, a real large enterprise that has used it and really vetted out the technology and those could be implemented in their world as well. My position in big data analytics and data warehousing is, again, I think from what we have seen so far and how we have used it, the big data technologies and tools are becoming more and more mainstream. It started with Hadoop, it started with, we're seeing a lot of movement towards Cassandra, Storm, Kafka, new technologies. And then the BI tools initially, 5 years ago when we started, there were not many BI tools on top of big data. There were only a few vendors. Now what we have seen is the traditional tools that you and I are used to for so long, like MicroStrategies of the world, they're building their connectors on top of big data technologies initially. So before, when we were talking about the analytics was all about custom tools and specific BI tools, specific vendors. It's now, as big data and related technologies become more and more mainstream, we're seeing the technologies that we're used to for so long, building their own connectors or own version of the big data technologies.
Thank you. George?
My name is Jörg Bienert. I'm a co-founder and CTO of PathStream, and PathStream is the fastest big data analytics engine, database engine when it comes to analyzing large amounts of structured data. So we have built, based on patented algorithms, a columnar store, SQL-based in-memory technology, highly scalable, that is able to analyze billions of records in sub-seconds, while continuously importing new data, such as time series data, networking data, point of sale data in the retail store, web analytics, and so on. And my take on data warehouse is that, of course, it will continue to exist, but as part of a broader big data initiative, a big data strategy in companies, because it was only made for specific use cases. It was good for collecting data from different sources, for doing cubes, for doing analytics with company internal data, but now there are additional requirements, analyzing data from the internet, analyzing data from networks, from sensors, and the amount of these data outgrows what was the typical data warehouse originally was built for. So data warehouse technologies cannot handle with this large amounts of data, and it cannot handle with unstructured data, so there have to be new technologies. And these new technologies will coexist with, besides existing and traditional data warehouse strategy technologies. So it will become a mixture. And there is another aspect that I want to highlight is the performance of the data that the user gets within the scenario business intelligence. So users right now from the internet, when they are looking into Facebook, Google, and so on, they are used to being able to get insight out of data, out of context, out of social networks within milliseconds. Immediate responses on large amounts of data, Facebook, Google, and so on. And they don't understand why they should wait for a report, for getting some KPIs from their IT department a day or more. So in business intelligence, there is a need for immediate insight and for real-time response times. And that is the other aspect that will change the whole area of data warehousing, big data in the enterprise.
Thank you. You're up.
Thanks. My name is Yuvraj Raghuveer, or you for short. I'm with SAP, with the Big Data team, the HANA platform for Big Data is what we call it. SAP HANA is again an in-memory technology. It's a hybrid database, it's transactional, it's analytical, and it also works on unstructured information. So based on this platform, we are able to address a whole load of enterprise issues, spanning from big data related scenarios all the way to Internet of Things, customer intelligence, and what have you. So there's a whole lot of emerging scenarios in enterprises that need to be addressed. SAP, as you know, is a very well-known world leader in enterprise solutions. 63% of world transactions touches the SAP system. That's how huge our footprint is. With regard to the position in warehousing and business intelligence, I have been speaking to several customers on how they can move to the next generation or next level of innovation in their enterprises. So what I would like to think about is they need to be on a journey. So data warehousing has traditionally been entrenched in extract, transform, load, harmonize data models, all these things that require heavy lift and shift of data, and moving it from several operational systems into a centralized warehouse. But then, given a geographically distributed organization, the time window is shrinking to get the data in the right form. So that is a huge challenge. And then, as was rightly pointed out by York, there are more and more data that's coming from the outside. So we can no longer wait for transformation of data into useful information. We need to start replicating information very fast. And not only that, we need to think about how data warehousing itself expands its footprint. It cannot be a centralized single system anymore, which is a well-known repository which is used for corporate reuse. We need to think about virtualization. We need to think about distributed processing in this larger construct called a logical data warehouse. That's where I think many of our audiences and customers want to take their journey towards. On the BI space, what we have seen is people are very familiar with canned reports, analytical reports, creating charts, and visualization. But the transformation that's happening that's out there that I'm seeing is that the business users want to explore information even as it arrives. They are not ready to wait for the enterprise data governance process to begin. So we're now starting to see a very interesting confluence between how structured reports and self-serve universes exist, along with how unstructured information can be brought in. So we're talking about sandboxes, we're talking about limited time exploration, talking about collaboration. That's the transformation that's happening. And not to leave behind the entire team of master analysts and data science and all these interesting things. They are getting mainstream as well. So this is from the platform side. And what SAP is trying to do is up-level it into the enterprise space, making it part of applications, making it part of their workflow. And that transformation journey is where we are seeing things happening and how enterprises are evolving.
All right, thanks, panelists. Let's start off here with some fun. I would say that BI has been a disaster. There's not much intelligence in business intelligence. And thinking that our frontline employees, decision makers, want yet another report with yellow and green and red arrows is helping them run their business is ludicrous. As an industry, we continue to push the same model to people who have no interest in being analysts, but yet we still provide retrospective reports. Is it time for the BI vendors, the old traditional ones, to step aside and let a new generation of BI vendors appear? I said it wasn't going to be fun.
There are 3 vendors and 1 user. Let these guys speak first.
I think it's not on. Very pushy. There you go. We'll figure this out. It's not as hard as that to do, but it's close.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so SAP had acquired a very large organization called Business Objects, and we're very well entrenched into this BI space. What we're starting to see is, yes, the traditional approaches of creating reports is getting dated. Right? So what are the reasons behind that? The reasons are because you always ask my team to get a project based on certain specific requirements, a specific way to design things. But what we are seeing is that no longer holds. Business wants to create their own ways of exploring information. That's why we're starting to talk about agile development models and working on non-pre-aggregated information and allowing for dynamic model creation. So that is exactly the place where we're going. And we're also seeing an adoption of the so-called NoSQL world set of technologies. This is definitely getting mainstream. And so the interesting point is how we can allow folks who have used the existing paradigms to gracefully extend beyond without having to relearn anything. So there is this interesting conference of where people were and where they want to get to without having to completely discard what they have learned so many years. And that's where we are going. We are trying to bring in this convergence of how reporting can happen on new technologies. And so I don't really think that we are giving away any space on that part yet. I think we still have a lot more things in our arsenal that's going to come along the way and make it really exciting for businesses to explore information in this larger context of enterprise data plus external data. Good. That's my position. Any more points to it?
So I think the question is a masterful question, but what I thought was even more masterful was how Anku redirected it instead of taking it on. Jokes aside,
Say the best for the last.
obviously this is a jokes aside, I think I'm a capitalist, and in this case I also believe in evolution, which means the fittest shall survive. Let the market speak. In terms of your very provocative question of has BI been a failure, I think the answer to that clearly is, to a large extent, yes. Why is it? In my opinion, there are two reasons. Three, but I'll condense it to two. The first is, I think the industry as a whole, whether it's through relational databases or NoSQL, Hadoop and MapReduce paradigms, still hasn't dealt with the difficult yet important challenge of master data management. What it results is in something else, which I have a colorful term for later. The second thing is, I think, despite the recognition of how important analytics is, most folks have been focusing, users included, and also vendors, on really the pretty picture, as opposed to dealing with the hard challenges of data acquisition, data quality. That doesn't change in a big data world, right? So the lack of master data management and the lack of data quality hold good in both the data warehousing and the big data worlds. And not following that is not going to create information or data repositories, it's going to create data suppositories. So frankly speaking, the failure here is a failure of doing things right in order to come up with a consistent and believable view of the enterprise and the other things that influence the enterprise.
I think there were two major reasons why BI wasn't very successful in the past. One is the adoption on the user side, or the ability of the users to really think about what they want to do with the data, which was on the other hand mainly caused by the technology and the features that the technology could provide. And the link between both sides is usability. And I think this is going to change in a way like the internet changed it. For example, we are, and everyone, my wife, my kids now, these days, are used to use applications in the internet in a way that 20 years ago someone would have requested a manual or training for a CRM or ERP or whatever application, entering data, browsing through it, and today people are used through the higher usability of these applications to to just step into it and enter data, get data out of it, work with Facebook, work with everything without any manual, without any training. That's not necessary. And I think that this has to happen in the BI space as well. So on one hand, that we are going to see better user interfaces, and on the other hand, higher speed, so that you get immediate insight on what you are requesting from your data. And by doing this, by combining better speed, even on, especially on large amounts of data and new user interfaces, we can train users to get into a conversation even with large amounts of data, and that will make the way users are looking into the data differently and as easy as perhaps are looking into Facebook and other web-based applications today as well.
So I'll speak from a user point of view on how we've seen this here. So when you think about BI, the BI requirements are changing every day. Our BI requirements yesterday were not the same as they are today. There are a lot of trends. If you see, the data type is changing. So at Sears, what we believe is if you move fast or move up. So if yesterday's tools, if they cannot accommodate the requirements of today, then they were to be out. And then let today's tool take over, which include data science, advanced analytics, and whatnot. So a couple of things. ETL has always been a problem for large organizations, right? And there are different vendors trying to solve in different ways. How we are doing it, using Hadoop is the typical enterprise data hub concept that a lot of organizations are talking about today. But Sears has been doing it for the last 5 years now. And Sears Holdings is both Sears and Kmart, and two very synchronous, very different POS systems. Data is coming from two different systems, but then as our shopping habits are changing, we go on Sears.com, we want to buy Kmart.com products, and we want to buy Kmart product written in Sears store. So there's a lot of business usage underlying there. We need to have technology that enables these business transactions. And in order to do that, so I'm only talking about one use case here, which is bringing, what we did was we brought data from these two disparate systems, we flattened the data, really built that Hadoop as an enterprise data hub, and on top of that, we put BI presentation tools. And as I said before, we had to look for new tools several years ago. So we started with Datamare, then we tried Tableau, we're trying Evolve Data now. There are a bunch of different tools that we have looked at. And then we saw connectors coming from existing tools like MicroStrategies of the world, and they were able to solve a lot of problems. Like Control-M, they did not have a Hadoop scheduler before. They were primarily, traditionally, a mainframe scheduler based company, and now they have a Hadoop scheduler, so we are able to use them. So I guess if yesterday's BI tool providers are unable to include the data science, the advanced analytics, unable to support the data type that is changing. Today, our conversations are happening on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and whatnot, not as much in person. So there are a lot of initiatives internally that are about looking at sentiments of people, and our brands are governed by that. How many people are talking about Sears in a good way or in a bad way and whatnot. And looking at machine learning, looking at people's videos and whatnot. So essentially, again, the data type is changing constantly, what was not there before. And if today's tools cannot accommodate that, then certainly they should move on.
I would like to step up the conversation to one higher notch as well. So today, one of the reasons why BI has been seen as not being as successful as it should be is that it sucks out information from the several operational enterprise systems and provides value. The key value prop that BI vendors take forward is, folks, you have information in your transactional systems, but you really don't know what's happening. You need to put it together in a centralized place from where you get the enterprise visibility. Now, what if we did not have to do that? What if we did not have to extract information from other systems to do exclusive reporting? What if you could report directly or do analysis directly on operational data? And what if I can deliver for you that information extremely fast? That's where in-memory technologies are going. That's where the convergences are going. The silos are getting destroyed. So we are trying to simplify the IT landscape in such a way that your transactional system and analytical system can coexist on the same platform. That's exactly the space where in-memory technology, along with disk-based technology, along with distributed processing technology, are looking at distributed workloads that are going to enable not only transactional systems but actually have analytical systems as part of it. What does that mean? Your entire process model changes. Your essential theme of trying to search, which is internet behavior, you search and you refine your search and then you find what you want, is getting to become a part of your enterprise operational behavior. So your processes will then become transactional, analytical, transactional, and they will keep jumping that way. And that's another way how the BI space can evolve and you can reinvent how BI is going to look going down the line.
So you raise an interesting point here, and one of the things that when people talk about big data, one of the big driving factors of big data is the economics. That is, what it used to cost me to manage data and build analytics is 20 to 50x cheaper. Not 20 to 50%, but 20 to 50x. I have a very good friend who's a senior vice president of analytics at Travelers in Hartford, Connecticut, and his research said that for the same cost of storing 4 terabytes on his traditional enterprise data warehouse, he can now put 200 terabytes on to do 20 to 50x, right? However, some of the enterprise data warehouse vendors must have missed this memo, because the trajectory on some of the enterprise data warehouses is not going down 20 or 50x. What does this mean to the traditional data warehouse vendors? We see, particular to their business models, you see that kind of dramatic or drastic change in the economics of managing, storing, and analyzing data.
So I think that's a great question, Bill, and
I only have great questions.
may sound like a bit of a plug coming from who my employer is. But frankly speaking, I do believe that in the end, the best solution that's going to work is going to be a hybrid solution that combines your relational database along with big data and comes up with both options available to support the use cases that demand. So, if you are able to essentially use big data approaches to bring more data and process it quicker, do it in a more distributed environment, and are still able to do what you can do with relational databases today, I think that hybrid approach is going to be the only feasible approach in the short to the mid term. Can we have a 100% big data analytics approach support and completely replace what we know as data warehousing and BI? As Anku points out over here, I'm sure that may be possible for very many use cases in specific industries in the future, if not in the present. At the same time, coming from the industry where I do, in healthcare and life sciences, I'm sorry, I don't see a 100% Hadoop world ever ruling the roost. It's not going to happen for reasons of privacy. It's not going to happen for reasons of compliance. It's not going to happen for the fact that a patient goes towards multiple touch points, not all of which are, frankly speaking, social media driven. At the same time, healthcare, more than any other industry over here, is aptly poised for taking advantage of what's happening in big data. 80% of healthcare data is either image data, your X-rays and your mammograms and your MRIs and your CT scans, video or waveform data, and clinical text or clinical notes. So, while I admit that there's going to be much more opportunity for big data moving forward, I don't think it's going to be anything beyond a combination of approaches for at least the short term.
With regard to how much data you can store how economically, I think we're kind of missing the point. What I might get to is, yes, Hadoop is extremely cheap for very large data sets, but typically data is at least 3 variable. It's a high variable system, so you're planning for failure of hardware risk, which means you're essentially creating redundancy information. But that's good because it's a high variable system, it's more focused. On the other hand, what businesses want to focus on is the value of data. So what we're trying to talk about here, which is also building on what Prashant said earlier, is that not every data point that you collect and store in your data fabric is really valuable to data. There's some that is more valuable, some that might be an immediate adjacency, and some that might be purely archival or for historical reasons or for regulations or for various purposes. regulatory and compliance purposes. So, which means the value quality of data is a slider scale. So the question you really have to ask is, what is the data you really believe is important, on which you need to react very fast? And where would you want that information to be? And how would you want to handle the business risk and continuity on that particular value chain? So, as we start looking into data as along the value scale, there is a place where you would like to store data that you don't mind losing. So when you go and do a search, and if you don't get the same set of searches, does it bother you? Probably not, because even if a certain amount of information is not there with you, it doesn't really hurt your business. But can you have two different business units reporting on data and coming up with completely different numbers? Way off. Your business will collapse. So, enterprise quality data is of completely higher level than the regular data you get, and there is a transformation process and value generation process that takes it from any data you collect, the data you can directly use. So it is not so much as the cost of storage of data, but the subsequent value that you generate from data that really determines where the data really needs to exist. So did the data warehouse vendors miss the memo? Well, I don't think so, because the kind of problems that we're trying to solve is more oriented towards the value of information for an enterprise to make good decisions. And yes, the world of Hadoop and the world of NoSQL is definitely improving, and you can see a lot of things happening there. It still has a long way to go. And that's probably what Prashant was also indicating, was saying. Maybe many of these industries are still a little bit apprehensive. But how much of valuable information can they really put in there? And can they really survive a crisis situation without having to have any negative impact on their business?
I just would like to add two additional aspects, because I think it's not just about the cost of hardware. Yes, you get more storage for hardware right now, and this is increasing. But the amount of data is increasing faster. So there will be a continuously growing gap, even with the development of the hardware sector, if you don't look at new technologies, new algorithms. You can't just say, I throw more hardware on the problem and that's it. We really have to look at new technologies and really intelligent technologies that make use of the hardware, do better compression, do high parallelization in order to get this gap closed. And the other aspect is it's not about hardware and software, it's also about setting up and maintaining a system. And these days a lot of companies say, well, it's taking me seven digits amounts of money to set up and maintain a Hadoop-based system. Because standard SQL-based environments, people are trained, people are used to managing, they are easier to handle, and this higher maintenance cost is taken into account when thinking about what technology and what platform to choose in order to analyze the big data.
Yeah, so I don't have an answer, but I have the same question. I wonder what these guys would do. But I can tell you the story of, and there are different decision points involved as an enterprise you're thinking about it. You've already bought Teradata boxes, you've already bought Oracle, you already have SAP. You're not going to take it all out. You've already made the investment. The question is, do you want to grow investment there? And that's the same question we faced 5 years ago. We accidentally started our journey with Hadoop because our pricing team, it's a little story there, our pricing team was doing this initiative where we saw Amazon to change price in one time. And then seriously, we have this 2,500 plus store in a very large online setup. How could we do that? When we are looking at store pricing, we're looking into weather, we're looking into computer pricing, we're looking into inventory, looking into so many other factors. So our pricing team was doing this in small analysis where they were looking at, they came to IT and they said, give us additional cost for 10 terabyte of storage on a Teradata box. IT team went back, they costed it out, and what turned out was that additional cost to buy that much storage in Teradata box would actually outweigh the whole benefit we thought we would get from that pricing initiative. So we realized we needed to do something different. And that's when we started looking at Hadoop and big data technologies essentially. We knew 10 terabyte was only the demand of that time. We were going to look at 100, 200, 500 and petabytes of data. And I mean, that's how we started our journey on Hadoop, and we grew our footprint. So, I mean, to UV's point, is smart data, I mean, there are a lot of architectures that are possible. I was actually in a meeting with Dr. Dane, the founder of Hadoop, and he said Hadoop can replace EDW completely. I personally, from an enterprise point of view, haven't seen that happening, really. I don't know. I mean, we have supported a couple of other retailers, small retailers. They do not have the EDW and they're 100% on Hadoop. But the other large enterprises who already have EDW, I don't see that replacing at least tomorrow. It may change in 2 years. But so there are different architectures possible. You could use Hadoop pure archival mechanism. You could use Hadoop for batch processing and use your EDW for hot data, as you pointed out. It depends on how you architect it. But certainly, if I were a vendor, I would certainly be thinking about it. I'm seeing trend already. You have HANA Hadoop now, right? You have Hadoop and Esther data. If you were not thinking about Hadoop, I'm sure you wouldn't be doing all that. So as a vendor, certainly, I mean, everybody's noticing it, everybody's implementing it all.
So if I may just play off on Ankur's point, Ankur, so if you don't mind, you mind describing, you talked about the replacement of the EDW having happened as yet, hasn't happened as yet. Are you talking about the EDW in terms of relational databases and ETLs? Or are you also looking at it from the data management processes, such as managing quality of data and processing?
Actually, everything. So when you're looking at EDWs, because data is no more, I don't see that data as a necessarily relational or non-relational. It's data. It's coming from different sources. Some sources are sending you RDBMS, like POS systems, and there are other sources like your social media and whatnot that are sending you unstructured data, your image files, your video files, your plain text files. So it's all of that. So EDW, the way actually my personal view is, it's bringing it in from these different sources, and then essentially everything else that you said, data governance, MDM, and whatnot.
So what we're going to do here now, the second here is we're going to have you, if you have a question for the panel here, there's a microphone up here. I'd like to have you come up forward and ask a question. And while you're formulating your question and thinking about what it might be and coming up forward here, one of the things in this discussion that I think is interesting is when you get down to it, it's not a hardware discussion, not a hardware debate, it's not a software debate, it's a perspective debate. What I mean by that is BI has been very useful at reporting what has happened, right? End of quarter, end of month, Monday morning when your executives come in and log into your dashboards, by golly, those numbers better be 100% accurate, right? What were sales last week? Things like that are important. The challenge for most organizations is how do we then add to that this more predictive, dealing with data that's not quite always accurate, it's not quite always good enough, right? So how do you leverage in an environment where, looking forward, I'm never going to know for certain what sales are going to be next week. I can put a score on that, I can put a probability around it, I can put a confidence level, but I don't know for certain. So there are two different kinds of mindsets. The BI world has done, I will tell you actually, I think it hasn't failed. For what it's done, I think BI has done a marvelous job of giving you report cards of what's happened in the business and practices of data governance and MDM, ETL, and things like that have allowed us to have a lot of confidence in our executives and under delivery. What's happening now is we're now being introduced to new technologies and, more importantly, a new approach that allows us to start thinking more predictive and eventually prescriptive. How I leverage about what's going forward. Not what happened, but why it happened and what I should do next. So with that, questions from the floor. Is it time to really, come on, sock it to us? Nobody's up for the challenge. You guys want to break early? Come on, really, come on. There we go. I see somebody leaning forward. Come on.
She's a stretch.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to go to some more backup questions. I tell you, they're not very exciting. Okay. Some of these we already kind of talked about. Let me pull out one here. The role of vendors in this discussion. It's tricky, right? You want to educate, you want to sell. How well are vendors doing in balancing the need to educate, which means fairly pragmatic advice, versus selling, which sometimes means over-glorified statements? Any comments on that?
Definitely there is this need to discover what customer or person really needs to get, what is their end state. And when we're introducing new technologies into the marketplace, it becomes an interesting conversation because people are pretty much entrenched in what they already know, pretty comfortable. They might require a few tweaks here and there. Just like when they introduce a car, if you ask the people who rode horse carriages, they will watch how fast are horses. That's typically what customers want. They want something that can do their job better and easier and maybe cheaper. But when you introduce new technologies into the marketplace, like SAP HANA and memory technologies, which come at a premium, then it becomes a completely different conversation. We are trying to sell value and we're trying to sell a customer experience. So what we tend to do typically when we embark on such a conversation is we introduce techniques like design thinking. We introduce techniques like personas. We introduce techniques like how can you reinvent or renovate the IT landscape. And that's essentially how we build up the larger conversation, saying where does the organization really want to go? And in that journey, how can we, SAP or as any other vendor, support you in that conversation? And that is essentially what we say. And what we have found is very quickly we're able to identify use cases which the customer believes are very valuable to them, and we're able to generate value and show them in a proof of concept. And that really crosses the conversion. So it's not so much as hyperbolic statements which cannot justify. When we get into a real conversation, we're able to get down to the level of detail that is necessary to really show the value and then define the roadmap. And that's what makes us going. And that's why customers still come back to us and look forward to what's the opinion we have in the marketplace and how can that influence their thoughts in innovation.
Yeah, I think one of the things I completely agree with what Raj just said. It is about educating customers on the business value they can bring, because the quickest way to lose customers is to essentially sell them a bit of technology without being clear about what value that brings. And not just being clear about what value it brings, helping the customer get that value out. And I think that's the key point really, because the questions I hear often in my role from the market are not so much, yes, they do want to know why Oracle is better than SAP, and I've got 10,000 reasons as to why that is the case.
We have to separate here today.
Different conversation for a different day. But the more common questions, believe it or not, along the lines of, okay, we have decided to go with one technology, in this case yours. Can you please educate us on how we can get it? We have this immediate problem we want to deal with. What do we have to put in place? What are we not considering? I think it's our duty as vendors to not just educate customers on the usefulness of use cases, but also help them define those use cases so that they get maximum bang for their buck when they do decide to buy products.
And I think education is exactly more about defining these use cases and making the user think out of the box. Because we often experience that users from business lines are not able to think about what's possible with these new kinds of technologies, with these new kinds of speed. We are talking to customers and telling them, well, think about the report that you are getting once a week, or you're waiting one day for some KPIs. What can you do if you get these numbers in a second and you can act interactively on these numbers? You can ask a question, get the answer immediately, and then ask the next question, then can enter into a conversation. That is something that, yes, users have to be educated mostly, in a lot of times, and it helps a lot when you then can provide a system where a user can play around and make his own experience, and then really create new ideas on what to do with the data.
I was going to say, you asked the sales guy, are you honest? So, I don't know. Well, from an enterprise point of view, we are So there was a recent article from Morgan from Gartner, and he said there are only about 1,000 companies total that are using big data. So big data has a lot of hype. A lot of people don't even understand it. A lot of companies, just because a C-level heard about it, and they want to direct whoever and say, go launch Hadoop, go launch whatever, buy Hadoop on HANA or Hadoop or whatever, and go for it, without really realizing what they want to do, without understanding those use cases, or business value out of it sometimes. So there's definitely a huge education piece involved as far as big data. So that is concerned, seriously, hear from a lot of companies, really. That's why I want to talk to us, that you started so early, what were the problems you faced, what kind of business use cases you have built. And then before coming here, I was at the Gartner BI conference in Vegas, and I asked a lot of attendees there, did you find the BI tool you were looking for? So I do not perspective on the BI side as much, and I was curious, there were lots of Gartner BI conference, you name a vendor and the vendor was there essentially. And it's funny, a couple of answers I got, they said, there are a lot of promises, and somebody said it right, he said, it's a three-legged stool, and I have yet to come across a vendor who can provide all three legs. It's generally two of the three that they have come across. So I do not have a personal take on it, but that's really what a lot of attendees that were at the conference said, and it's interesting. I'm not sure quite everything.
So I do think that a key part of the education process, and the vendors, by the way, obviously have a vested interest in making sure that the customers know what's out there, is this vision question, right? How do customers envision what's possible? Especially with respect to what's important to their organization. The case studies are nice, the use case discussions are nice, but at the end of the day, organizations struggle to envision how they leverage all these great sources of data and all this new technology to really have material impact on their business. So last question here, and then I'll release you. You have a question? Yes, sir. Here you go, come here.
Big excited to be one person.
You got a question? Thank God. You didn't want to hear my last question, huh?
Hey, last question too. So I'm just curious, it's great. I started my career in code on SQL. The challenge with SQL is that if you're developing an application, you have to gather new data. You go add a new table in the SQL, and just to add a new extra data to capture, I have to change my device. That's a big work. Now I have to think like how to do this data, how to change the schema. On the other side, if you look at new modern technologies like NoSQL and things like that, someone asked me, I have to capture that field, I can add it immediately, I don't have to worry about how now. So the open source world of NoSQLs and Hadoops have provided the power, at which the things is possible in our stage, but it takes a lot of time. So my question is more for the vendors, especially SAP and Oracle, is that there are so many good practices in the open source community, and how does Oracle and SAP look in terms of consuming those good practices, so that even I firmly agree with you that the hybrid world is must stay. Not overnight. I cannot move my Avo overnight. I cannot change my SQL installation and capture the data to one SQL thing. So, but I still see the need of, if I have to capture new data feeds, I have to go with the technology where I can easily do it. And I don't see vendor like the big old-fashioned industry anything in that space.
I'd like to take that first mainly to point out that we should definitely catch up right after this panel is done, because I can introduce you to the wonders of what the Oracle Big Data Appliance does. Now, other than that, coming from Philips Healthcare, you will recognize that yes, like you said, the hybrid world is here to stay. At the same time, Philips more than anybody else has to deal with DICOM and videos more than any other vendor, I would say, on earth, with the exception of GE and Siemens, and we don't talk too much about it, right? I don't think it's a question of either or at all. Again, I'm not here to represent Oracle's point of view. There are people who are smarter than me and who get paid more than me to do that officially for our IPs. But simply speaking, I think Oracle is making a tremendous investment, has been for very many years, in leveraging open source technologies to benefit our customers. The Oracle hybrid approach essentially uses the combination of the RDBMS for everything that the RDBMS does well, and also Oracle's version of Hadoop and NoSQL along with the rest of the stack, and also Oracle Enterprise R to bring everything together through the hybrid architecture. Now I do see one of my salespersons in the room, so we'll make sure we connect with him right after this.
Right. So from my side, I would like to answer that question into two parts. The first part is you're absolutely right. When you're trying to talk about user experience, you're trying to talk about change in the user experience in terms of number of feeds, whatever. The way SAP approaches the problem is, do we have the same speed for everybody who's using the system, or do we need to think about persona-based approach? Which means what's important to you might not be important to your colleague, might not be important to your manager. And so the way you approach the system or the way you interact with the system, why do we see Facebooks and Twitters of the world so fascinating? Because it's so minimalistic. It just serves the purpose it is designed for, and we absolutely fall in love with that purpose. So the whole idea is how can I engage an enterprise audience and an enterprise user with the system so that the productivity essentially improves. So going on that philosophy, what we are doing is we are creating an entire paradigm of design principle. It's called theory. We're creating user interface driven data models. Now how is that possible at all? The moment you start thinking about non-materialized views, when you think that your data which gets represented in your UI is coming from a non-materialized view which can be dynamically changed, you can essentially invert your design process. You can start with your user interface, say what are the fields, what is relevant for your user, for your persona, and drive it down to the data model that is going to serve that user interface, and that data model is represented in a dynamic view which is described as a meta model, and that gets executed only at one time. Right? And that can happen when you start using in-memory technologies, when you start using columnar stores, when you start using all these fascinating things. Right? So that is one direction in which we can, in one way in which I can answer your question, say, adding fields should be no more difficult than adapting your metadata representation of an non-materialized. You're not having data transformations, no persistent information. So your change is extremely fast. On the other side, what we also want to do is we want to bring the NoSQL world in a way that is seamlessly consumed in your existing reporting and analytical world. Today's SQL still dominates, right? The maximum consumption we are seeing even in the group world is based on a project called Hive. HBase is close, but Hive by far is the most consumed world. Why? Because we still understand structured information. But I would go back and challenge your statement that adding a field in a NoSQL world is easy, because it tends to be more code intensive. There are several more layers you need to worry about. So, what we are enabling from a larger context of how this technology platform is evolving is we are enabling a federated model on an in-memory technology, which allows you to virtualize data and go and grab information which doesn't exist in HANA today. So I can go and grab out data from another HANA system, another Hadoop system, another relational database system doesn't know. Because we are able to actually use that information we are using caching, smart technologies of transformation, functional compensation. I can go through the whole lot of technical aspects. But the point being that on one side we are trying to reach the user and end user through a persona-based approach where we can create screens first and then we find the data model behind it. And on the second side, we're also enabling you to gather information from adjacent systems and present it in the paradigm you're very familiar with. So that's how I think we're completing my story.
Okay, last question. You're going to get a phone call from a good friend of yours who happens to be a BI person. They're getting ready to walk into the manager's office and they want to know what's the single most important skill that I should learn to transition from a BI person to a data scientist. And oh, by the way, I've got 10 seconds. Go.
Use tools that allow you to create predictive models automatically. So there are ways in which you can actually look into data and create predictive models and
Thank you.
verify.
Next question. In 10 seconds. Okay, go.
Become curious about the world and the data that surrounds it.
Got it. I was going to say that, just curiosity.
Got it.
Think out of the box and have a look and be aware that there is not only one solution for all your problems.
Got it. So that is actually, I would totally agree. It's an attitude. Right? There's skills, there's tools. God, there's a shitload of tools out there, right? Right? So, and it's changing all the time. It's an attitude. Be curious. Ask the correct question. Don't be satisfied with the answer you have. And yes, have an appetite for data, even if you have no idea in hell how you're going to use that data. Go get it. Thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of the show.